Fall of Rome, a conspiracy of corruption. The decline and fall of the Roman Empire is one of the most complex and pivotal events in world history. Rome, a civilization that once ruled the Mediterranean and established some of the most enduring legacies in law, politics, and culture, gradually disintegrated under the weight of internal corruption, political infighting, and external threats. While the fall of the empire is often depicted as a singular event, it was actually the culmination of centuries of gradual decay. This decay was not only due to barbarian invasions, but also because of the political corruption, betrayal, and instability within the very heart of the empire. This analysis aims to examine the key factors that led to the collapse of Rome, focusing on the role of corruption, political conspiracies, and internal revolts that ultimately weakened the foundations of one of history's greatest empires. It explores the deep-rooted issues within Roman society, economy, and governance, illustrating how the empire's internal decay made it susceptible to external threats, ultimately leading to its downfall. The rise of corruption in the Roman government. At the peak of its power, the Roman Empire was a symbol of strength and unity, with a sophisticated legal system, military dominance, and a flourishing economy. However, over time, a deep sense of corruption began to seep into its political structures, eroding its foundations. This corruption was primarily driven by the vast wealth accumulated by Rome's elite, who used their political power to further their personal agendas. The Senate, once a revered institution that helped guide Roman politics, gradually became a place for bribery, nepotism, and power struggles. Senators, instead of serving the public interest, often engaged in underhanded dealings to increase their own wealth and power. Political influence was bought and sold, and the integrity of the legislative body was severely compromised. The Roman system of patronage, where the wealthy elite had control over large swaths of land and resources, further entrenched corruption. The ruling class had the power to dictate laws that would benefit their own interests, often to the detriment of the common people. This pattern of corruption trickled down to lower levels of government, where local officials, judges, and military leaders often used their positions for personal gain. Corruption within the military became particularly damaging, as commanders were more interested in acquiring wealth and political power than in serving the emperor or the Roman state. As the empire expanded, these corrupt practices were harder to control, and their impact became more pronounced. Political conspiracies and the fragility of leadership. Another major factor contributing to the fall of Rome was the constant political instability caused by corruption and infighting among its leaders. The emperor, who held supreme authority, was often chosen through a combination of military support, inheritance, or political maneuvering. However, as the empire grew, so did the competition for power. Emperors were frequently overthrown, assassinated, or replaced by military generals seeking to seize control. The lack of a clear and stable succession system created a power vacuum, with rival factions within the empire constantly vying for control. The Praetorian Guard, originally formed to protect the emperor, became an influential political force. Over time, they often played a pivotal role in determining who would rule Rome. This led to a cycle of short-lived emperors, many of whom were weak, ineffective, or more concerned with their own survival than with governing effectively. As a result, Rome's leadership became highly fragmented. The emperor no longer represented a unifying figure, and instead, the empire was divided between competing political factions, military leaders, and regional governors. Each group sought to expand its own power, often at the expense of the empire's unity. This constant power struggle made it difficult for Rome to address its many internal problems or defend itself from external threats. The consequences of this instability were far-reaching. The Roman military, once the backbone of the empire, was no longer a cohesive and disciplined force. Instead, it became a tool of political maneuvering, with generals using their legions to further their own ambitions. The result was widespread corruption within the military, as soldiers and officers alike sought personal gain, often ignoring their duty to the emperor and the Roman state. Economic decline and the corruption of wealth. The economic prosperity of the Roman Empire was built on a complex system of trade, agriculture, and conquest. The empire's vast territory allowed for the collection of taxes, tribute from conquered peoples, and the exploitation of resources from all corners of the empire. However, as the empire grew, so did the economic inequality between the rich elite and the impoverished masses. This divide was exacerbated by the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few powerful families and individuals. The wealthy elite, including senators, military commanders, and emperors, grew increasingly detached from the struggles of the common people. They amassed vast fortunes through land ownership, slavery, and exploitation, while the majority of Romans lived in poverty. The concentration of wealth in the hands of a few created an environment of social unrest, as the common people grew resentful of the elite's privilege. Additionally, the Roman economy began to show signs of strain. The empire's reliance on slave labor for agricultural production and manufacturing became unsustainable. As slave populations declined, particularly in the wake of rebellions like the one led by Spartacus, the Roman economy struggled to maintain its previous levels of productivity. Inflation also began to rise as the empire debased its currency to fund military campaigns and lavish imperial projects. The economic decline was further exacerbated by the corruption of officials who abused their power to enrich themselves. Corrupt practices within the tax system and the illegal appropriation of state funds undermined the empire's economic stability. The wealth that once flowed into Rome's coffers was now siphoned off by those in power, leaving the state unable to properly fund its military or public works. Internal revolts and the erosion of Roman unity. As corruption spread through all levels of society, internal revolts became more frequent. The once powerful Roman legions, which had been the backbone of Roman dominance, were no longer the unified force they once were. Military leaders, often motivated by personal gain, began to use their power to challenge the emperor's authority. One of the most significant examples of this was the rise of military factions that declared themselves emperor, leading to what is known as the crisis of the 3rd century. During this period, the Roman Empire saw a rapid succession of emperors, many of whom were assassinated or overthrown by rival military commanders. This instability weakened the empire and made it more vulnerable to external threats. The disunity within Rome also extended to its provinces. The empire, once a unified whole, became increasingly divided, with various regions acting more autonomously. As local leaders and governors sought greater power, the authority of the emperor and the Senate diminished. This fragmentation of Roman authority made it difficult to defend the empire's borders or maintain its internal infrastructure. Revolts by the common people also became more frequent. The growing economic disparity, combined with the harsh treatment of the lower classes, led to widespread unrest. The urban poor, in particular, felt increasingly alienated from the elite as they struggled to survive in a society that seemed to value wealth and power over human dignity. The barbarian invasions, the final blow. While internal corruption and political instability played a major role in the decline of Rome, external threats were the final blow that brought the empire to its knees. The empire's vast borders were difficult to defend, and as Roman power weakened, various barbarian groups took advantage of the empire's disarray. In 410 CE, the Visigoths, led by Alaric, famously sacked Rome, signaling the first time in over 800 years that the city had been captured. This event sent shockwaves throughout the empire and marked the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire. In 455 CE, the Vandals sacked Rome again, and by 476 CE, the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic general Odoacer, marking the formal end of the Western Roman Empire. The barbarian invasions were not a singular event, but rather the culmination of years of pressure on the Roman Empire. The Huns, Visigoths, Vandals, and other barbarian groups had been pushed into Roman territory by the advancing Huns. As the Roman military grew weaker, these groups exploited the empire's vulnerability and began to invade and plunder Roman lands. The empire's inability to effectively respond to these invasions sealed its fate. Legacy and lessons of the fall of Rome. The fall of the Roman Empire was a multifaceted process driven by internal corruption, political instability, economic decline, and external invasions. The empire's inability to address these issues ultimately led to its collapse. However, the lessons of Rome's decline remain relevant today. Corruption, power struggles, economic inequality, and a failure to adapt to changing circumstances all contributed to the empire's fall. These factors should serve as a warning to modern societies about the fragility of even the greatest civilizations. Despite its collapse, the legacy of Rome continues to shape the modern world. Roman law, political institutions, and cultural achievements laid the foundation for the development of Western civilization. The story of Rome's fall is not just a tale of ruin. It is a reminder of the importance of effective leadership, ethical governance, and the need to address societal issues before they become insurmountable. The Roman Empire may have fallen, but its legacy endures, offering both inspiration and caution for future generations. The decline and fall of the Roman Empire was not the result of a single cause, but rather a confluence of internal rot and external pressures. It serves as a valuable case study for understanding the complex dynamics of empire building, governance, and collapse. The empire's story is a tragic yet powerful reminder of the need for vigilance, leadership, and ethical governance in the face of power.